Our next speaker is Terrisa Bukovinac. She is the founder and executive director of Pro-Life San Francisco, which is a millennial-focused grassroots activist group operating in what is arguably the most pro-choice city in America. She is the director of West Coast operations for Secular Pro-Life and has served on the board of directors for Rehumanize International. As a feminist, atheist, pro-life, registered Democrat, she is familiar with the challenge of bridging ideological divides. Let's welcome Terrisa Bukovinac.
Hey everybody, so great to be here again. I know I saw a lot of you guys in Denver last year, and I actually met the hosts from this year then. They had just kind of stumbled in last year and now they're hosting this event. So it's pretty amazing how this conference can actually be a catalyst for so many other amazing things. So yes, I'm Terrisa. I am an atheist, I'm sure you heard, and I think the title of the talk is, Can You Be Not Religious and Pro-Life? Well, obviously you can, because I'm here. So I'm going to talk about some other things about what we can do about that and why secularism is important, because you might be thinking, well, most of the country is religious, so why would it matter if there's a few secular pro-lifers out there? And I'm going to explain why. But I also wanted to mention that although I operate almost exclusively in the state of California, I'm native to Michigan. My family goes back generations in Adrian specifically, and my mom still lives in the house that my great-grandparents built there. So I have a great deal of interest in what's happening in this state, and it's really an honor to be here. Now, just to get an idea of the kind of diversity in the room, and I have my thoughts on where we stand, but I'm just curious, if you are Catholic, would you mind standing up? All right, quite a few. Yeah, I see the hand, okay. All right, I'm gonna have you guys sit down. If you are Protestant, I'm gonna have you stand up. All right. I'll have you guys sit back down. Do we have any other religious affiliations besides not religious? Okay, awesome, cool. All right, now I'm gonna have everybody who's a millennial stand up. Anybody born between 1981 and 1997? All right, we got a few. All right, cool. Just to get an idea of who we're talking to here. So I am a co-director of Secular Pro-Life, and I am here representing them today. I also founded a grassroots organization, which was mentioned earlier, in San Francisco, obviously one of the most pro-choice cultures on the planet. But I got my start with Secular Pro-Life originally, and what we do is create a safe space in the pro-life movement for pro-life atheists and agnostics and other non-traditional pro-life people. And we've also worked to help the pro-life community as a whole to use a shared basis of understanding when communicating about abortion. And actually, we've been around 10 years. This is our 10th year. So we aren't even new anymore. Thank you. So, like I said, you kind of are probably wondering, why is secularism important in this? And I'm going to explain. But in order to explain why being secular is important in the context of being a pro-life Democrat, I have to go back to talk about millennials. And you guys have probably heard a lot about millennials. You probably have your opinions about them, but regardless of how you feel, millennials now represent the largest demographic in the history of our nation. We are the largest generation, outnumbering baby boomers. And we are born between the ages of, the years 81 and 97. So I believe that's the age of 38 to 23 or something like that, 22. So I think a lot of times people just put all millennials kind of in this young people category, but most millennials are in their late 30s now, so it's not just about young people. And when we're talking about students aren't millennials. They are a younger generation. They will come with their own challenges, but right now, millennials have all the political and cultural power. They have it all. And that is why they're talked about so often. They are also the largest demographic targeted by the abortion industry itself. We're much more likely to have abortions than anybody else. And just, some other statistics on who's actually seeking out abortion. So 75% of abortions done in this nation are done on poor or low-income families. And I think that that's really significant. And of course here, 62% are religiously affiliated, so that's significantly lower than the general population. Millennials are also the most secular generation in the history of our country. And I think that you can see here now that actually the religiously unaffiliated of millennials is the largest religious demographic for millennials. So it's shifted dramatically since the silent generation. And I think that we have to understand that when we're talking about how we're going to eventually influence our nation on abortion. Millennials are also the most LGBT identifying. And what we find over and over again is that even though those who identify as LGBT are still in a minority, the vast majority of millennials find LGBT rights issues to be extremely crucial. And this is one of their top issues as voters and just in terms of their general ideology. We're also the most racially diverse. And I think that you have seen that kind of come into play in elections and kind of the rhetoric that is targeted at racial minorities and how that really sends voters kind of away from the Republican Party, which leads me to my next point, which is extremely important for this group. Millennials are the most left-leaning generation in the history of our country. We're very, very likely to identify as a Democrat or a liberal. And, I think a lot of people will say, yeah, that's just because they're young, and young people are always much more liberal and then they become more conservative. But again, millennials are not just young people. We're talking about people who are in the workforce, who have life experience, and are still holding very strong to left-leaning ideals. And yet, you may be surprised to know, or you may not, that they are still just as anti-abortion in their beliefs as baby boomers. In fact, some polls show that they are a little bit more intense in their pro-life position. And yet, that gets lost amongst their other left-leaning ideals because they'll ultimately continue to lean that way politically, and if there's no leadership in our party to give them any kind of moderate position on abortion, it gets completely lost. And I want you to really look at this and understand why the abortion industry values millennial opinions so much, and I want you to recognize how they have used the ideals that millennials hold so dear in order to push an abortion agenda. None of this has anything to do with abortion, actually, for the most part. It's about other left-leaning issues, but it's promoted by Planned Parenthood. So this is how they are targeting the exact generation that we need to have some type of victory. So the goal for millennials is to get them out, to get them to be visible and to get active in their own communities, especially very left-leaning communities like San Francisco. We want them to fight the abortion influence, and they have to feel emboldened. And I'm sure that you're, thinking, yeah, that's pretty remarkable. These millennials, they hold these pro-life points of view, but yet they're not emboldened in their communities. We have very few of them here in this room, actually. So the question is why? Why can't we get past this obstacle? And it's because of confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is something that has been widely studied, and it is the tendency of every person to believe the sources and articles and information that they come across that reinforces their already pre-existing worldview. And specifically, millennials hold confirmation bias against conservatives, Christians, and pro-lifers. They lump these things together, and I mean, they're just as susceptible to confirmation bias as the rest of us. We have them too, but in this case, this is what's important. Now, you guys might remember what happened last year, or this year actually, at the March for Life. There was a group of conservative young boys that encountered a Native American man, and the press just went to town with it, saying that they were blocking him, and everybody believed it, including me. I'm a Democrat. I'm like, oh, those Trump supporters. Yeah, you can't trust them. Of course they would do something racist like that. And yet, when the video was released, these kids were totally vindicated. It was the Native Americans that had initiated some kind of confrontation with them. And this picture of him smirking, he had stood there for a very long time and made lots of facial expressions, but this is the one that got captured because it confirms the pre-existing belief that Republicans would do something like that, right? And this is at the March for Life, so it's tied in with abortion. Up here you have like the campaign against pregnancy centers, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, and how just because you don't offer abortion, you must be a fake clinic. It's just, it doesn't matter if you have a medical license and nurses and doctors on staff. If you don't do abortions, you're not really here for women's health. So again, an instance of confirmation bias. And then again here, atheists more motivated by compassion than the faithful. This is a title to an article that shows definitively that religious people give more to charity than atheists. But because of their confirmation bias, they read it as, oh, they found some other evidence that suggests that atheists do it more out of compassion, and there's your headline. So this is what we're up against. The minute that we associate any part of our pro-life opinions with anything conservative, religious, there's going to be a huge wall of confirmation bias that we have to overcome. And I don't know if you guys have spent much time in the pro-life movement lately, but we're really good at reinforcing these stereotypes. And we're really good at kind of not being able to reach millennials. So it's just this constant cycle of a problem. But changing minds is totally possible. There's been quite a bit of research on this in the last few years, which I take a particular interest in. And what we have found is that it is extremely difficult to get people to change their minds. It is near impossible to get someone to consider another point of view. And in studies, they've shown that if you suggest an alternate point of view to someone that they disagree with, they're going to disagree with you right at the front of the conversation. But if you show them evidence that proves them wrong, they are going to double down on their opinion. And this happens over and over and over again in testing. So what have we done as a movement? I feel like the main things that we've focused on is educating people, showing them the facts, and just being really nice and respectful. Guys, it doesn't work. It doesn't help change people's minds at all. But there are some things that have proven to, in some cases, change people's minds. And I think that this is the path that we should likely take. Now, I'll say a lot of things that I think that you guys should do, but take it with a grain of salt. It's up to you what you want to do with your pro-life outreach or your ministry, and you can tell me later how you disagree with me. So I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just making suggestions. You can take it or leave it. But what we found is that the closer a new idea is to the old idea, the more likely someone is to consider it. And when we're looking at groups of people, let's say we're looking at a group of pro-life people and we're looking at a group of pro-choice people, and nobody has any signs or any kind of like messaging going on, so we don't know which group is which. But do you think you could tell which group is which? I think you could. I'm pretty sure you could tell. And that's problematic for us because it's like from the get-go, the new belief is already so far away from the old belief. And with millennials being so left-leaning, and we're kind of giving them the impression over and over that you should really be more conservative, and you should hold biblical sexual moral values, and you should, become a Catholic, and then you'll be pro-life, and then we'll all just be pro-life Catholic Democrats. It's just too far of a jump for most people, and it's just their confirmation bias goes up, they can't get there, and there's nowhere to go. So, but I have a personal testimony, believe it or not. I used to be pro-choice. I grew up in a religious household in Adrian, and at some point over the course of my life, I lost my faith. But it was during this time that I reevaluated my position on abortion. I thought, if I only have one life to live, if there's no divine justice in the end, well, maybe abortion's problematic. And I kept thinking about it over and over again and harboring pro-life points of view. I knew that I had pro-life points of view, but I couldn't really say it like that. And by this time I was living in San Francisco, so the question is like, where do you even fit in if you're a pro-life atheist? Is that even a thing? And this was, this was a while ago. It's a thing now, thanks to secular pro-life. But back then it was very rare. And so I harbored these opinions secretly. And one day, a girl that I had hired, I used to be a Starbucks store manager for many years, and a girl that I had hired years ago, a Berkeley grad, was posting on Facebook. We stayed friends on Facebook. And I saw her posting on this site called Secular Pro-Life. And that was it for me. I started checking the site every day. I was getting active online. I was getting more into the arguments. And before long, they asked me to join the leadership. And then, the rest is kind of history. But I never would have found my way to the pro-life movement if I hadn't found secular pro-life. If I hadn't seen someone just like me, well, Monica's a conservative, we'll forgive her for that, but she is an atheist and she's pro-life. And it changed my world completely. So not only am I pro-life, I'm here talking to you guys about how to make other people pro-life. And if we can make another me every year, then we're gonna win. And we cannot do that, though, unless there are more of me that are visible, that people can see, that they're like, that's just like me. I also, am an atheist or left-leaning or don't hold biblical sexual moral values or any of the other things that are normally associated with being pro-life. That is how we're going to reach them. But, that doesn't represent everyone. And I totally understand that. It's we want you to be who you are. But we want to give millennials a way to have a voice. And that means that we have to encourage them. And we can only encourage them by demonstrating sameness, by showing them that there is a place for them to belong. I would have had no idea that I could step into a conference like this one day and feel like I belong here. But secular pro-life made that possible. And there are ways that you can cultivate other people in your groups who maybe don't fit the general stereotype. It's okay if you do, but maybe there's someone else in your group who doesn't. And it's about cultivating those relationships and giving them a chance to take the lead and be given a voice so that other people like them can hear them and they can come out and do the work. I think it's really important, again, how we look. Like I mentioned before, you look at the two groups you already know who's pro-life and pro-choice, that's super problematic for us if we really want to turn the culture around on this issue. We have to look and sound and speak like them. And I think, these are just some great examples of what Rehumanize is doing. I'm so glad so many people are giving them a shout out. Just being able to reach more ethnically diverse millennials, using language that makes sense to them. It makes sense to us, we're Democrats. This says, Planned Parenthood is a cynical, archaic remnant of a eugenic past, continuously upheld by the white supremacist and patriarchal structures we seek to dismantle. I think it's also really important, too, to point out that millennials care a lot about activism. about protesting. And this is also something that's super consistent with Democrats. We are the party of protesting. We are the party of getting out on the street and the grassroots movements that will drive forward social justice issues. And if we aren't demonstrating sameness with those types of social justice issues that have come and won, then we aren't demonstrating to millennials that it is that type of movement and that their involvement is needed and necessary. I put this up here because it's a Democrat conference. It's okay if you like Trump, I won't be upset, but yes, this is the best. So we obviously have a huge part to play in this because millennials are left-leaning and they hate Trump and they want a world that the Democrats are painting, but they do harbor these pro-life opinions. And it's up to us to continuously show that we're not centrists. This has to be a progressive movement. We are not trying to take our party back. We can't. We could take our party back to, how Bill Clinton was in the 90s, and that will be progress for us at this point. We have kind of hit rock bottom in terms of our leadership, but we are still here, and we represent the community more and more every day. The Marist poll, I'm sure you guys saw early on in the year, suggests the vast majority of Democrats and millennials want to see late-term abortion restricted. And yet we have no leadership at this point on this issue. But we need to make sure that that happens. And I think that, again, it has to be a new message. It has to be something that people think that they haven't heard before. We can't tell people that they were wrong, even though they were. We can't tell them they messed up in '73. We have to tell them this is a new idea, and the world is different now, and we have new technology, and we will show you a new way. And maybe we do have to work as incrementalists through our own party. But with enough effort, we know that the statistics are there. The pro-life opinions of millennials exist, and it's up to us to bring it to the surface. So thank you so much. Happy to take questions.
I don't know if it's so much of a question, but thank you. My eyes need to be opened to the millennial generation. I have a daughter. She'll be 35, so she is on that end of it. But you have just really enlightened me, and thank you. I'm so glad to have been here today to hear what you had to share, and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terrisa. I'm just miffed that Gen Xers like me lost our chance at power, but that's a different subject. My question is, can you just offer any experiences you might have had of talking with millennials who maybe weren't with us? Any fruitful conversations or ways the sort of approach you've laid out has maybe planted a seed?
Yeah, thank you. I think we have got to focus on late-term abortion, infanticide, and medical research. This is major common ground with the vast majority of Americans. I think a lot of what happened in Alabama and what's happening, in more conservative states is creating this conversation around hard cases that are controversial even amongst pro-lifers. But what we really need to do is shift that national conversation back to where we almost all agree, which is that doing live dismemberments and medical inductions of potentially born alive infants for medical research on late-term abortions or on late-term fetuses is completely wrong. And I think it's easy for pro-choicers to understand, too, for most of them in my community, that this is, once you get to that level, it's not even an issue of bodily rights. We're talking about, are you going to put this infant in the ICU or are you going to send it to the medical research lab? That's the kind of stuff that really can compel someone who is politically pro-choice. And I think we really we've lost so much ground as Democrats, which maybe we needed to get back up. But we have to look at every single incremental moderation of the Democrats to be a win, and we have to celebrate it. So even if we have a candidate that's saying, I oppose infanticide and I will write in protections, and make sure that abortion doctors are held accountable if they terminate the lives of born-alive infants. Right now, that's a progressive move. It's sad that that's the case, but that's where we have to start. So let's start with the most serious cases. Let's leave the hard cases aside for now, because we need to unite as a movement. That's something that we're never going to have to stop doing. We're going to have to work at that every step of the way. So that means that we're going to have to work with people who have lots of different opinions about hard cases or even first trimester abortion. But we have to get everybody on board to end the late-term abortion. And I think that's the best way to kind of break into these more democratic and left-leaning, ultra-liberal cities on this issue. And I do want to mention again, or if I didn't mention it already, I am very active in the animal rights movement in San Francisco. I'm a vegan. Animal rights is kind of what brought me into actually being an activist. And what I found is that there's a lot more crossover from those communities than I think people realized before, because now, I'm there, I'm telling them, come over here. So that's really helping. But also the political situation there is interesting, because the city is very, very interested in passing things like right-to-know legislation around how animals are raised, and right-to-rescue legislation is something that we've been pushing for a while. So it's interesting to play it on one hand and then turn around and say, yeah, okay, but about the baby killing. So I think that that's another way that we can kind of break into these leftist circles and give another voice to kind of younger people that are looking for more nonviolent direct action, a way to get involved, a way to be a real activist that has nothing to do with people looking at them like they know that your political and religious affiliation. Thanks, everybody.